Do you dread the math portion of case interviews? Perhaps you don't come from a quantitative or analytical background. Or maybe your math skills are rusty from not having done math in a while. I'm a former Bain manager and interviewer, and I'm going to give you a comprehensive review of case interview math. This is the only video you need to watch to learn case interview math. By the end of this video, you'll know all of the math fundamentals you need to solve any case interview. In just about 20 minutes, we'll cover the 6 fundamental math concepts you need to know, how to solve the 5 types of case interview math questions, and 5 case interview math tips to put you in the top 10% of candidates. One of these math tips is our number 1 tip that helps most candidates cut their math mistakes in half instantly when they use it, so make sure you watch until the end. Case interview math will show up in every consulting case interview. If you cannot solve case interview math problems quickly, efficiently, and correctly, you will not be able to pass your consulting interviews and land a consulting job offer. Case interview math may seem difficult and intimidating, especially for candidates without strong quantitative backgrounds, but the math itself is very basic and simple. Let's get started right away. The 6 fundamental case interview math concepts. You should be familiar with the following math fundamentals: fractions, decimals, percentages, ratios and proportions, basic statistics, and algebraic equations. Let's quickly cover each of these. Fractions. Fractions are numbers expressed as one number, the numerator, divided by another, the denominator. Examples include 1/2, 2/3, and 3/4. You should know how to do the following calculations with fractions. Simplification. 36 over 54 equals 2/3. Addition. 1/3 plus 1/4 equals 4/12 plus 3/12, which equals 7/12. Subtraction. 1/3 minus 1/4 equals 4/12 minus 3/12 equals 1/12. Multiplication. 3 over 4 times 4 over 9 equals 12 over 36, or 1/3. Division. 3 over 4 divided by 9 over 2 equals 3 over 4 times 2 over 9, which equals 6 over 36, which equals 1 over 6. Decimals. Decimals are numbers expressed as a whole number and fractional part. A decimal point separates these two components. Here's an example. 1542.36 equals 1 times 1,000 plus 5 times 100 plus 4 times 10 plus 2 times 1 plus 3 times 0.1 plus 6 times 0.01. You should know how to do the following calculations with decimals. Addition. 1.21 plus 3.5 equals 4.71. Subtraction. 14.2 minus 8.05 equals 6.15. Multiplication. 1.12 times 5 equals 5.6. Division. 14.7 divided by 4.2 equals 3.5. You should also be familiar with scientific notation, which is a decimal expressed as the product of a number with only one digit to the left of the decimal point and a power of 10. For example, 2.731 times 10 to the power of 2 equals 273.1. Percentages. Percentages are numbers expressed out of 100 or per 100. Example, 75% equals 75 over 100, or 0.75. You should know the formula for percent change. Percent change equals the new value minus old value divided by the old value. Example, the price of gas last month was $3 per gallon. This month, the price increased to $3.60 per gallon. By what percentage did the price of gas increase? Percent change equals $3.60 minus $3 divided by $3, which equals 20%. The price increased by 20%. Ratios and proportions. A ratio is a relation between two numbers. It can be expressed in one of 3 different ways shown here. A proportion is a relation between 2 equal ratios. Examples include the following. Example, a factory requires 2 supervisors for every 15 workers. If a factory has 45 workers, how many supervisors are required? We know that the ratio of supervisors to workers is 2 to 15, or 1 supervisor for every 7.5 workers. To find the number of supervisors required, we can divide 45 workers by 7.5 to get 6. Therefore, 6 supervisors are required. Statistics. Only very basic statistics knowledge is needed for case interviews. You should be familiar with 4 important concepts: mean or average, weighted average, standard deviation, and expected value. The most important concept is calculating the mean or average of a set of numbers. Example, If our three largest competitors are paying $10 per hour, $11 per hour, and $15 per hour for labor, what should we expect our average labor cost to be? The average equals 10 plus 11 plus 15 divided by 3, which is the same as $36 divided by 3, which equals $12. So, the average cost of labor is $12 per hour. You should also be able to calculate a weighted average, which is a calculation that takes into account the varying degrees of importance of numbers in a dataset. Example, laptops have a profit margin of 20%, while repair services have a profit margin of 60%. If 70% of our company's revenues comes from laptops and 30% of revenue comes from repair services, what is the overall profit margin of the company? To determine the average profit margin of the company, we take the profit margins of each product or service and multiply it by their respective weights. In this example, the weights are determined by the percentage of the company's total revenue. So, profit margin equals 20% times 70% plus 60% times 30%, which equals 14% plus 18%, or 32%. The overall profit margin of the company is 32%. You should also understand the concept of a standard deviation, which is a measure of how spread out the distribution of data is from the mean or average. You won't need to ever calculate this in an interview, but you should be familiar with how to interpret it. A large standard deviation means that data points are far from the mean and are spread out. A small standard deviation means that data points are clustered closely around the mean. Finally, know how to calculate expected value, which is a predicted value calculated as the sum of all possible values multiplied by the probability of occurrence. Example, a fashion design company is considering partnering with a national retailer to sell its clothing. If the partnership were to happen, there is a 40% likelihood that the partnership will be a success and the company will achieve $120 million in sales in the first year. However, there is a 60% likelihood that the partnership will be less successful, generating only $40 million in sales in the first year. What is the expected value of sales in the first year? The expected value is 40% times $120 million plus 60% times $40 million, which gives us $72 million. The expected value of sales is $72 million in the first year. Algebraic equations. A variable is a letter or symbol that represents an unknown quantity. Only very basic algebra is required for case interviews. You should know how to solve a linear equation that has one unknown. To solve a linear equation with one unknown, you will need to isolate the unknown variable onto one side of the equation. Remember that whatever operation you do on one side of the equation, you must do the same operation on the other side of the equation. For example, a company's revenues grew by 60% this year compared to last year. If this year's revenue was $100 million, what was the company's revenues last year? To solve this question, let x equal the company's revenues last year. And we have 1.6x equals $100 million. The unknown variable is already isolated on one side of the equation, so we just need to divide both sides of the equation by 1.6. This gives us x equals $62.5 million. The company's revenues last year were $62.5 million. If you're finding this video helpful, please take 3 seconds to give this video a like and subscribe to the channel so that you don't miss any of our new consulting case interview content. Let's move on to the 5 types of case interview math questions. Now that you know the consulting case interview math fundamentals, you can move on to learning the 5 types of math problems you'll likely encounter in consulting case interviews. These are profit and break-even questions, investment questions, operations questions, charts and graphs questions, and market sizing questions. For each type of problem, we'll go through what formulas and concepts you need to know and go through a few practice questions. Profit and break-even questions. Profit questions typically involve calculating revenue, costs, and profit. Revenue is the income a business generates from its operations. Costs are the expenses the business incurs in running its operations. Profit is the earnings that a business keeps after paying all of its expenses. There are 4 basic profit formulas that you should know, which can be put together and simplified into a single comprehensive equation for profit. Profit equals revenue minus costs. Revenue equals quantity times price. Costs equal total variable costs plus total fixed costs. And total variable costs equals quantity times variable costs. Putting these together, we get the formula profit equals price minus variable costs times quantity minus total fixed costs. Example, A pizza store sells 100,000 pizzas per year at a price of $10 each. Assume that each pizza costs $4 to produce. The store pays $150,000 per year in rent and hires 2 employees at a salary of $75,000 per year. What is the pizza store's annual revenues, costs, and profit? To solve this, we simply need to use our various profit formulas. Revenue equals quantity times price, or 100,000 pizzas times $10, which equals $1 million. Variable costs equals quantity times variable cost, or 100,000 pizzas times $4, which equals $400,000. Fixed costs equal $150,000 plus 2 times $75,000, which equals $300,000. Total costs equals variable costs plus fixed costs, or $400,000 plus $300,000, which equals $700,000. And finally, profit equals revenue minus costs, or $1 million minus $700,000, which equals $300,000. From our calculations, we know that annual revenues are $1 million, annual costs are $700,000, and annual profit is $300,000. Another type of question are profit margin questions. Profit margin measures how much earnings a business keeps relative to its revenue. You need to know the profit margin formula, which is profit margin equals revenue minus costs divided by revenue, or profit divided by revenue. Example: what is the profit margin of the pizza store in the previous example? To solve this, we simply need to use the profit margin formula. Profit margin equals profit divided by revenue, or 300,000 divided by a million, which equals 30%. Therefore, the pizza store has a profit margin of 30%. The third type of question you may be asked are break-even questions. A break-even occurs when a company sells enough product such that it has exactly recouped all costs. In other words, break-even occurs when profit is zero. To solve for the break-even point, simply set profit equal to 0 and solve for the unknown variable in the equation. Example: how many pizzas does the pizza store in the previous example need to sell in order to break even? For this question, the unknown variable we are solving for is quantity. Therefore, set profit equal to 0 and solve for this unknown variable. We know price equals $10, variable costs equal $4, fixed costs are $300,000, and Q is the quantity needed to break even. So, plugging this into our profit equation, profit equals price minus variable costs times quantity minus fixed costs, and we set this to 0. So, $0 equals $10 minus $4 times Q minus $300,000, and so Q equals $50,000. Therefore, the pizza store needs to sell 50,000 pizzas in order to break even. Investment questions. Investing is the use of cash today in hopes of creating wealth in the future. For case interviews, examples of investments you'll see include a company spending money on marketing to generate sales, a company spending money to build a new product to increase revenues, a company spending money on infrastructure to decrease costs in the long term, a company spending money to acquire a company to increase revenues, or a private equity firm acquiring a company to resell in later years for a profit. Investment questions will typically ask you to calculate a return on investment, known as ROI, and the time required to break even, also known as the payback period. You will need to know the following 2 formulas. Return on investment equals profit divided by investment cost, and payback period equals investment cost divided by profit per year. Example: a software company acquires a machine learning startup for $20 million. The startup's expertise in machine learning is expected to improve the software company's product such that it will generate an additional $4 million per year in profit. What is the payback period? Payback period equals investment cost divided by profit per year, or $20 million divided by $4 million, which is 5 years. It will take 5 years for the software company to recover the cost of the investment. Example: a private equity firm purchases a roofing tile distributor for $100 million. After growing the company's revenues within the first few years, the company was then sold for $130 million. What was the return on investment? Return on investment equals profit divided by investment cost, or $30 million divided by $100 million, giving 30%. The private equity firm has generated a 30% return on investment over the time period. Operations questions. Operations problems typically deal with production and the usage of machinery or plants. there are two key formulas you need to know. Output equals rate times time, and utilization equals output divided by maximum output. Example, if it takes a factory 2 hours to produce 100 cars, how many cars can the factory produce in a full day? Assuming the factory operates for 24 hours, we can calculate the hourly production rate by taking 100 cars and dividing it by 2 hours. This gives us a rate of 50 cars per hour. Therefore, the factory's maximum output in a day is 50 cars per hour times 24 hours. This gives us 1,200 cars per day. Example, if the factory produces 900 cars per day due to lunch breaks and shift changes, what is the factory's utilization? To find utilization, we divide the output by the maximum possible output. 900 cars per day divided by 1,200 cars per day gives us 75%. The factory is operating at 75% efficiency. Charts and graphs questions. There are 10 types of charts and graphs you should be familiar with. Simple bar chart compares a single variable. A stacked bar chart compares a single variable and shows the segments that make up each bar. A 100% stacked bar chart shows the percentage each segment makes up in a bar, enabling percentage comparisons across bars. A pie chart shows the percentage each segment makes up of a total. A Marimekko or Mekko chart is a more complex version of a pie chart, and it shows the percentage each segment makes up of a total across 2 dimensions. Waterfall chart. This shows drivers of change between 2 comparison points. A histogram shows frequency distributions. A line graph shows changes in a variable over time. A scatter plot shows the relationship between 2 variables. And finally, a bubble chart is a more complex version of a scatter plot that shows the relationship among many variables. Whenever you are given a chart or graph, the very first step you should do is to read the axes of the chart or graph out loud. This will help you determine what information is being provided. This is especially helpful when you are given several charts or graphs. Reading the axes of each chart or graph out loud will also help you see the relationship across different charts and graphs. Market sizing questions. Market sizing questions ask you to determine the size of a particular market. Market size is defined as the total amount of sales of a product or service in 1 year in a given geography or region. However, it can also be defined as the number of units sold in a year or the total number of customers that would purchase a product or service. There are 2 main approaches to solving market sizing questions. A top-down approach starts with a large number and then refines and breaks down that number until you get your answer. A bottom-up approach starts with a small number and then builds up and increases the number until you get your answer. Let's look at an example. What is the market size of tires for personal vehicles in the United States? To solve this market sizing question, we can use a top-down approach. Start with the United States population. Estimate the average number of people per household. Estimate the percentage of households that own cars. Of these households, estimate the average number of cars owned. Multiply by 4 wheels. Estimate the frequency in which wheels are replaced. Multiply by the cost of a tire. And then multiply all of these figures to determine the market size of tires for personal vehicles. Let's start with the United States population of 320 million. We can estimate that the average household has 2.5 people. Therefore, there are 320 million divided by 2.5, or 128 million households in the US. Assume that 75% of US households own a car. That gives us 75% times 128 million households equals 96 million households that own a car. Among households that own a car, the average number of cars owned is about 1.5 cars per household. Therefore, 1.5 cars times 96 million households equals 144 million cars. Each car has 4 tires, so there are 4 times 144 million cars, which equals 576 million tires for personal vehicles in the US. Tires are replaced approximately once every 6 years. Therefore, in a given year, 576 million tires divided by 6 equals 96 million tires that are sold. If tires cost an average of $100 each, then 96 million tires times $100 equals $9.6 billion. The market size of tires for personal vehicles in the US is $9.6 billion. Let's move on to case interview math tips. Now that you know the case interview math fundamentals and the 5 types of case interview math questions, let's move on to reviewing a few case interview math tips. Using these tips will help you differentiate yourself from other candidates. Tip number 1. Develop a structure before doing math calculations. Do not begin doing any math calculations until you have developed an approach or structure. This will prevent you from making unnecessary calculations and help you avoid making math mistakes. Additionally, by presenting your structure to the interviewer, you can get a confirmation on whether the approach makes sense. Once the interviewer approves of your structure, the rest of the math is simple arithmetic. Tip number 2. Round numbers when appropriate. Use round numbers to keep the math easy and reduce the likelihood that you make a calculation error. For example, if you are making assumptions about the size of the United States population, use 320 million instead of 319 million. If you are multiplying 199 by 17, see if the interviewer will allow you to round so that you are multiplying 200 by 17. You don't want to round too much since this may signal to the interviewer that you are uncomfortable performing math calculations if the numbers are not easy and round. However, rounding occasionally can help simplify the calculations and reduce the likelihood that you make a calculation error. Tip number 3. Use abbreviations for large numbers. This tip is our top case interview math tip. Implementing this tip can instantly reduce your math mistakes by 50% or more. If you're working with numbers in the thousands, millions, billions, or trillions, use abbreviations rather than writing out all of the zeros. For example, 10,000 can be expressed as 10K, 200 million can be expressed as 200M, 30 billion can be expressed as 30B, and 4 trillion can be expressed as 4T. This makes multiplying and dividing large numbers much easier if you know the shortcuts for multiplying and dividing by these abbreviations. You should know that 1K equals 1,000, 1M equals 1,000K or K times K, 1B equals 1,000M or K times M, and 1T equals 1,000B or K times B or M times M. For example, 14,000 times 5,000 equals 14K times 5K. 14 times 5 equals 70, and K times K equals M, giving us 70M. 2,000 times 14M equals 2K times 14M. 2 times 14 equals 28, and K times M equals B, giving us 28B. 12M times 6M equals 12 times 6, which is 72, and M times M equals T, giving us 72T. Tip number 4. Use the rule of 72 to estimate growth. The rule of 72 is a shortcut that lets you estimate how long it would take a market, company, or investment to double in size. Simply divide the number 72 by the annual growth rate to get an estimate for the number of years needed to double in size. For example, if an investment is expected to grow at 9%, then it would take approximately 72 divided by 9, or 8 years for the investment to double. If a market is growing at 12% per year, then it would take approximately 72 divided by 12, which equals 6 years for the market size to double. Tip number 5. Sense check numbers along the way. Accidentally missing zeros or adding extra zeros during your calculations is the most common math mistake. After each step of a math calculation, you can do a quick sense check to see if your answer is in the right order of magnitude. For example, if you're multiplying 125 million by 24, you should expect your answer to be in the billions because 100 million times 20 equals 2 billion. And with that, you have completed our brief overview on case interview math. You are now fully equipped to answer any quantitative question in your upcoming case interviews. You'll just need to practice and hone your math skills. If you're looking for a quick step-by-step overview of how to solve the entirety of a consulting case interview, make sure to check out our video on learning case interviews in 30 minutes. I've linked the video in the description below. And last important message for you, if you're looking for a step-by-step shortcut to learn case interviews quickly, check out our comprehensive case interview course and books. Links are in the video description. We teach the most robust, effective case interview strategies in the least time-consuming way to save you hundreds of hours of prep time and help you land multiple consulting job offers.